Welcome back to the Alternative Highs podcast, the number one podcast in southwestern Ontario. Today, I am sitting here with Brock McGregor.
Yep.
Do you go by Dr. McGregor, or how do you?
Brock most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I was going through some of your socials. I went through your website, and I was like, man, I always feel kind of weird not calling somebody when they've worked so hard to get to that level. But so Brock, we'll start out with career talk. So naturopath.
Yep. So I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been practicing for 12 years now in Chatham, and then I'm a city councillor. So this is my third term. So I'm 10 years into that. As well, and then I teach in the nursing program at St. Clair College in anatomy and physiology. So I've got a few things going on right now.
And you're dead.
Yeah, and I got 4 kids. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, the naturopath is very fascinating. For people that don't understand that, could you give like a brief what a naturopath is?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit by province or by state based on regulation. But in Ontario, we're primary care providers. So we essentially offer non-pharmaceutical treatment. So we're a regulated health profession, meaning, just like chiropractors, physiotherapists, medical doctors, we have a regulatory body that sets standards that we have to meet. So naturopathic doctors in Ontario all have 4 years of training after post-secondary training, so undergraduate degree, 4 years of training after that, and then have to, pass board qualifications. So essentially what we do is we work with patients typically around chronic disease, so a lot of like lifestyle type diseases, things like irritable bowel syndrome, chronic pain, mental health issues, and just help patients navigate non-pharmaceutical treatment options. Okay. So, obviously with the internet now, you can Google stuff and there's so much information out there. So a lot of people are really looking to sort of distill that and figure out, okay, like what can I trust? What should I do? What does the evidence say I should do? And that's really where we help people.
I was kind of doing a little brief. Yeah. I try not to do. I don't want to overanalyze. Yeah. What do you like the vitamin IV?
Yeah. So I have a license for that. So we do that at our clinic. So we do it for some different things. It's kind of an interesting treatment. You'll see it popularized sometimes in Instagram posts and stuff with celebrities getting IVs. So that's a little bit different, but. We'll do it for some conditions as what we call a complementary treatment for patients with cancer. So if they're going through other treatments, sometimes this can be helpful as an adjunct. We'll also do it in some patients with like chronic fatigue or patients that really have absorption issues. So maybe, they're in a flare-up of inflammatory bowel disease and feeling depleted. That's an easy way to bypass digestion. So there's a few different things we'll do it for, but it's kind of depends on after we assess the patient. If we think it's going to work for them or appropriate for their condition, then we might use it for them.
Now, and I don't want to seem like it's jumping all over the place, but in time, how do you, with being a politician as well and being a doctor, how do those cross over, or how do you bring them together, or do some things like in our community make you want to? I don't even know how to word this, but like, is there ways that becoming this person has brought your doctor side and the politician side together? Yeah,
I think so, and I think that's true sort of in any profession. You spend all this time training and learning, and it I think dictates to a degree the way you approach problems, right? So one of the reasons I first got involved in politics is when you're living in a community, you're treating patients. You can do a lot for a patient that's in front of you, but you recognize that benefiting more people takes a broader approach. So there's things outside of individual treatments that make a real difference in someone's health. So things like poverty and good built environmental spaces so people can get outside, and policies that impact their lives, right? Those things have such a huge impact on someone's overall health. When you're thinking about health all the time and you're seeing all these things all the time that you can't change as an individual practitioner, it is motivating to then want to get involved on that policy side. So that's kind of where my interest sort of pushed into politics, is saying like, there's all these big issues and small issues to some degree that are impacting people's lives and health on a daily basis. You can't change it with a pill, you can't change it with a treatment, but how can you use some of your energy to to move that needle a little bit too. So that's one of the things that made me interested and want to get involved in politics.
So with that, is there a policy that you've done that you're like super proud of? Like,
yeah, there's a few. I mean, Chatham-Kent's changed a lot in the past 10 years, for sure, since I started. And I grew up here, went away for school, but came back. So I've been part of the community for a long time. And I think that a big component of health is feeling included in a community at times. So we know that people that are socially engaged, that feel part of a community, have better health outcomes. Yeah. And I think that when you build a community that is more welcoming to people, that has a direct impact on their well-being. So I've seen that as a huge component that's changed in Chatham-Kent. So with respect to, say, inclusion of the LGBTQ community within Chatham-Kent, that's changed a lot. And some of that has been through municipal leadership and making sure we're supporting groups that are doing some of that hard work. We've definitely seen Chatham-Kent as a welcoming community really grow. So when we think about, some years ago, welcoming Syrian refugees to the communities, making our community more reflective of Ontario to a degree. So we've got cultural community groups that now are well established in Chatham-Kent. They feel supported. Awesome. They themselves are very inclusive. They want to share that culture with everyone. So I think the policies and things we put in place to help support that process, I'm particularly proud of. But everything's built really slowly. One little policy at a time. So sometimes we pay a lot of attention to the big projects, the big wins, the things that maybe get a lot of media attention. But it really is intentional. Small changes over time that start to have this big impact.
With that being said, in your third term, would you do another term? What do you got in you? How many years of this?
I don't know. Is there
anything you've got to see get done before you?
There's never a beginning and never an end, right? So like these things just they continue ongoing, right? So at some point you do have to say, I got to walk away and be okay with some things that are done, some things that are left undone. I don't know when that time will be. I mean, I've kind of made that decision close to each election. You figure out what's going on with the family, what's going on with other work, and if another 4 years makes sense. But there's some interesting things in the works. I will say one of the things that and it seems like a small thing I worked on for the past 8 years is we've always been trying to find a spot for the Chatham-Kent cricket group to play. And they've been playing out in Thamesville, and we said, we're going to get this field developed, we're going to get it developed. Finally, we've got this space over by St. Clair College, and it's a partnership with the college and with Hydro One. Amazing. And there's going to be a cricket pitch there. And I can't wait to actually be able to go and say, for all those phone calls that I took for all those years to say, hey, it took us a long time, but here it is finally. So
is that the one right beside
near the power line?
The
group.
Line group? Yeah, that's cool. Man.
Yeah, so that's going to be a neat development. It's got an indoor tennis dome. There's going to be pickleball courts there. All those things are going to be well used by the community. Oh, it's huge.
I was watching yesterday. I walked into the Y. I'm just watching a massive group of people, and they're intense.
And they're everywhere. It's like every day somewhere else.
I didn't even know it was a thing.
Oh yeah. And there's groups playing at the Wish Center. There's groups playing at the Y. In the summer, they're all over the place. Yeah.
It's such a wild thing.
And it came out of nowhere. You didn't hear about it, a few years ago.
No, I still get a kick out of walking through it. Like it's badminton on steroids.
Oh yeah. And it's full. Like there's tons of people all the time.
Nobody misses. No, they love it. The courts are all full. So there's the greatness of it. I love my community, but there's a lot of darkness.
Yeah.
What do people hound you the most about around here?
To be honest, it's changed.
And I don't want to make it sound terrible. Like I know people are. We live in a great community, but there's always problems in every single community. Obviously, our homeless situation. People always got an opinion on that, and they think that it's your job. Like, how does one answer that question?
I think the longer you do it, it becomes a little bit easier because you do gain some perspective. So, I'm fortunate to have a good relationship with colleagues in other municipalities that are doing the same thing we're doing. And the things we experience in Chatham, they feel unique sometimes, but they're not very unique. You talk to councillors in other areas, and they have the same Facebook groups that make certain comments. They have the same
100%.
and the same phone calls, the same emails. So I think part of experiencing that and talking to other people, you think, okay, this is a common thread, something we're going to have to deal with. And it has changed over time. I do think that with the change in the way news is delivered through social media, I did notice a lot less feedback when news was kind of taken off Facebook. So there was less comments. You'd have an issue come out. You'd think, I'm going to get a lot of feedback about this, and you just wouldn't see that amount. So that's been different. But I definitely think the tone has changed over time, and I think that understandably, people are frustrated about a number of different things, right? They see that life costs more. It's tougher to keep up. They see changes in the community. They see a lot more visual homelessness. And rightly, that's frustrating. And I think a lot of the feedback is an outcome of that frustration. And sometimes it's maybe not always directed in the most constructive way, or maybe in a way that's even really helpful to the conversation. But I think once you understand why people feel that way, you can take what they're saying with a little more grain of salt. So, being on council, you may live that every day, and you understand the policy, and you understand, the impact of funding from other levels of government and how different programs work and what's going on in maybe more of a macro area. Not everyone experiences that. So their daily experience is just what they're living and what they're seeing in the community. And so you can understand where that frustration comes in. And, for me, I understand that municipal politicians are the easiest ones to get a hold of. Yeah. So, we're just down the street over here on King Street. Yeah. We'll pick up the phone when you call. You can email us. You can show up at meetings. You can't do that to provincial politicians or federal politicians. So, it's understandable that when that frustration needs a place to go, oftentimes it's gonna end up with us. So I think that understanding people's motivations is really important, and then being okay at times to put up some boundaries and say, well, if this is the way someone's going to speak to me, let's just not engage with it. But finding the times when you can engage. It's easy to be anonymous and online and make comments and do those things, but a lot of times people change when you're face to face. So even someone you don't agree with about anything, if you sit down and have coffee with them, you're going to find stuff you agree on. Yeah. And likely that meeting's going to be a lot different than it would have been back and forth over an email. So, yeah. I've done that a number of times where people are surprised that they've maybe emailed me and I've tried to share some information. Maybe we didn't agree, and then I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. They're like, yeah. Well, why would you want to talk to me? Like, we don't agree. Well, we can still talk to each other. Yeah, that's the thing. And I think if you humanize that a bit, I think it becomes much less of a toxic thing, right? And at the end of the day, you can be like, well, we may not agree on everything, but here's the things we both care about, and understand that everyone has passion about what they care about, and use that energy in hopefully a more constructive way going forward. 100%.
I really appreciate that. I like that. When you're known in the community, everybody knows Brock's face. Do you ever find those people that are really tough to deal with, making out of line comments when you're out somewhere, cross that line when you're with the family? To be honest, not too often when you're out in the community. People are pretty good at, I think, for the most part, respecting when you're with your family and those types of things. And it's, once in a while I think, things have got heated in council chambers maybe, and that's where most of that has happened, or, comments online or emails, but that happens once in a while. I did once answer a Bluetooth call in my car, not recognizing what number it was, and my kids were in the back, and it was a pretty heated person on the phone, and I had to say, oh, wait, you're on Bluetooth, can you call me back later? Yeah. So that was maybe the one time my kids got a bit of a peek into what happens once in a while. 10 years?
It's not bad at all.
That's not bad.
Not bad.
I was kind of half expecting, people are angry. People got lots to say. I don't really engage in the posts. Yeah. I can't get that way with it, and I'm like, how thick does one's skin have to be a politician, to run a successful healthcare? Yeah. That's a pretty big, and like you said, you teach at the college. Yeah. And you're a dad, 4 kids. Yeah. What are the ages?
My 2 oldest are twins. They're 18, so they're both off at school. And then we have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. So Yeah, so they span the distance. Yeah, yeah.
What's school look like for the kids?
Yeah, so one's in nursing at Windsor, and the other is in aviation technician at Mohawk College in Hamilton. So
amazing.
Yeah, so kind of two different directions, but yeah.
And aviation, that's a cool one.
Yeah, yeah.
And the young kids, what's that like going from 18 years old to
yeah, it's a different environment, and it's kind of, you feel like you're repeating some of the stuff you did in the past too, back into like the younger hockey.
Children now, and even raising kids, like my kids are 20 and 17, and my stepson, everything's so much different.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to.
It's a lot different.
It's a big learning curve. I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's.
And it's a lot different, it seems like forever ago now, but like the pre-pandemic times versus now, things have changed significantly. Even when you look at, youth sports and different organizations, that was a tough time for a lot of those organizations. So they look maybe a little different on this other side. But yeah, it shows you how quick the world changes, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing the college?
A couple of years, yeah. So, and it's one or two classes, but it's a neat experience too. I've enjoyed it. Outside of being in clinic and then outside of council, it's a different opportunity to interact with a generation that I don't probably interact with a ton, other than my sons. It's kind of cool.
That would be an interesting one because people can learn a lot that way, and how they're moving. That's cool.
Yeah.
What's and we can separate this too. What's future look like in office, like in politics?
Yeah.
Would you like to expand school a little bit more, teaching?
Yeah, I'm not sure. In the past 10 or 12 years, opportunities have come up for me and changed, and I enjoy that. I think it, when you go through that change and you see new opportunities. It's exciting, keeps things a little bit new. So I don't know what will change over the next few years. Certainly, I know that you usually have a expiration date in politics. So at some point that will likely change for me. But it's been hard to predict. I will say that about it. I would say starting 10 years ago in politics, I never would have thought it would look like it does now. Starting my clinic 12 years ago, I wouldn't have thought it would look like what it does now.
It's pretty crazy that you did that, one after another, because that I can't imagine, but I can imagine how hard it must be to start a new office.
Yeah, and to be honest, the first time I ran for council, it was something I was really interested in, I wanted to do. I was also pretty realistic. I was like, it's tough to win your first time out, so maybe this will be some good experience. So 4 years I can win, and then I was fortunate to do well enough to win that first time. So it was. It was a quick transition, and it has given me a lot of opportunities. So I've learned stuff that I wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Is there anybody else in there right now with the kind of years you're saying?
There's a few. There's a few that have been around. Probably there's one that's been around the term before me. So Councillor Bondi. Councillor Crew was around before me, but then was off for 4 years as well. So I'm getting close to kind of the old side of the folks around the table, and there was a few of us elected at the same time that are still there. But it's seen kind of a complete turnover, which was interesting. When I came in, we still had the former mayor of Wallaceburg, former mayor of Dresden, councillor who'd been a councillor when Blenheim was on their own, someone who had been on Tilbury Town Council, like all this sort of legacy from pre-amalgamation, and now. We don't have anyone left other than one John Wright who served on one of those previous councils. So it's kind of feels a lot more Chatham-Kent now than sort of this collection of different communities, which I think is a good transition.
About that amalgamation.
Yeah, and we still hear the word once in a while, but when I first started, we heard the word all the time. And now it's that has changed a bit, which is interesting to see.
What do you think future looks like for Chatham-Kent as a whole?
Yeah, it's an interesting time here now. It's an interesting time in Ontario. We're seeing growth we had not seen in years, and there was a real peak to that growth a couple of years ago, but it's still pretty significant. So I think that's really changed our community. I think one of the things that has changed Chatham-Kent, and I think will continue, is sort of the new work environment. So post-COVID, I think there was a recognition of this hybrid work environment, that people can work from home a little bit more, and that sort of opened up where people could live, right? So we see certainly a lot of people in Chatham-Kent now that maybe wouldn't have lived here 10 years ago, but now they can telecommute a bit or go into the office in another city for 2 days a week. And that's really expanded the number of people that can make this home, which has changed the community. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And I do think with sort of the investment we've seen in Southwestern Ontario with Volkswagen, Stellantis, I think we're going to see a lot of spin-off from that as well, whether it's new employment or even if you look at people working in those areas. If you draw 100-kilometer radius around those two investments, Chatham-Kent's kind of right there. Yep. And I think there's going to be a lot of folks that live in this area that might work in those two areas, and that will change the community a bit. But I think we do have to make some big decisions around what the community is going to look like in the next 10 years. We went through some tough times, and during those tough times, we couldn't invest in a lot of the things other communities were investing in. So we think about our recreational infrastructure. I spent a lot of time in arenas, spent a lot of time with youth sports, and when you go anywhere else, people kind of recognize the difference in those communities, and hopefully the future sees some investment for that in Chatham-Kent. And then we have to recognize the ways we need to invest to keep our smaller communities viable as well. So, the way the province used to fund those 20 years ago is a lot different than they do now. So we've got to find new ways to make sure that those communities can continue to grow and thrive. And it's interesting to see some growth in those small communities at times too. So I think that that's a real asset to us, and is going to kind of dictate how we grow.
What would we have to do as a community to have investment come in with, say, new jobs, big, high-paying jobs, factory work, anything like that? I'm not a politician. I don't know politics. When I met you, it was such an easy conversation, and I don't want to come across dumb or anything. But what's it take for somebody, a big company, to say, hey, Chatham-Kent, let's invest in that? Is that making things look nicer downtown? Is that things looking nicer?
There's a whole bunch of different things that impact those decisions. Part of it, there's fair bit of luck, but I think part of it's sort of regional opportunity. So Chatham-Kent's well positioned. We're close to the 401, close to Windsor, close to London, close to the border. So those big economic trends really do impact whether or not investment will happen here. So that's a component. But the second component is really being ready. So a lot of it's having services ready to go. Right now, companies are looking for serviced, ready to go properties. So they want access to water and wastewater, access to natural gas, access to power. So they don't want a site that has none of those and they have to put those in, because that slows them down. So they want those sort of ready to go areas, which we're fortunate to have some. So that's a big component. And then there is a component to the community as well. So when those companies are looking around Ontario or looking around Canada, they're in contact with the federal economic development departments. They're in contact with the province, and they are certainly evaluating a community for how they can integrate into the community. Are there opportunities for their employees? Is there a labor force available? Is there going to be housing available or quickly available after they invest? So those are all things we have to be ready for. And there's been a lot of work that's been going on for years to make sure that
there's been quite the boom of homes gone up.
That if there's opportunities there, that we feel we can fulfill those. So we're seeing investment in power infrastructure in Southwestern Ontario for those reasons too, right? So that's going to dictate where some of this economic growth will happen. But certainly we have to be ready from a community perspective to make sure that we have the things that make a community a home for people when they come to work here.
How ready is our community at this moment?
I think comparatively in Ontario, we're as ready as anyone is. Some larger communities do have some, scale advantages, but they also have some disadvantages, right? So if you look at, the cost of living, cost of housing, and it's high here, it's even higher in some of these larger communities, and I think that that's sometimes a barrier for investment in those communities. So I think that's one place we have an advantage. But from a regional location advantage, I think we're well positioned for some of that, which is
It's good news.
Partly good fortune that we happen to be where we are, but you know, with some intentional planning along the way as well.
It is just kind of backtracking on the way this place has grown.
Oh yeah.
It has been absolutely wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's always something going on here. So
yeah, and it's interesting.
They are preparing for something.
Yeah, and it's been, you know, when I first started, that was on the heels of the 2008 recession. You know, we were still, it was a long recovery. We were still recovering from that.
Mm-hmm.
We had lost a lot of population. Some big employers had left. And so, you know, the talk in those early days of when I was there was really about like, you know, how do we attract businesses? How do we recover? How do we save money? All these, you know, very serious upfront issues. And that sort of changed over time where then we started growing and we said, oh, the issue now isn't that we need to attract more employers. We need to get some housing built. We need to work on affordability. You know, we need to find labor force because then we had companies saying, hey, like, we're doing great. We want to expand. We want to grow, but we can't find any more employees because, you know, unemployment's so low. We're tapped out. Yeah. When we bring people here, they don't have access to housing. So all of a sudden that focus had to shift to like, well, you know, it's less about attraction for a while and it's more about sort of building the community up so that if someone else is coming here, we actually have the assets we need. And we've seen that growth happen through, you know, through some intention. You know, there was no apartment building completed in something like 25 or 30 years in Chatham. And then in the course of the past 2 or 3 years, we've had, I don't know how many completed, but 6 or 7 started.
That was my next question.
It's a huge
there any
number.
More apartment buildings?
Yeah, and there's been more talk of some other developments. There's been you know, housing types that haven't really been in Chatham-Kent a lot in the past. So more development of things like townhouses or row houses that offer, you know, maybe a different feel or different sort of footprint than we traditionally see in some of our neighborhoods, and that can increase density, you know, offer more opportunities for people. So it's been interesting to see how
that is really
that
cool.
growth. And you know, the first few years when I was on council, we would see building permits for new housing or new units, and they would be between, you know, 120, 200 per year. And then we hit this peak one year where it was 1,400.
Jeez.
So there was that much increase, and now, you know, it's come down from that peak, but we're still seeing numbers that, if you would have said that 10 years ago, we said no chance.
Any idea of how many new builds have gone on?
Oh yeah, I just recall that peak of 1,400, which included some apartments, but and then I think it was maybe 1,000 the year after that, 800 the year after that. So it's been
that's wild,
markedly higher than it ever was, and it stayed that high for a while. Now there, you know, some economic forces that slowed that down with increased costs, but you know, I think, looking at the Ontario trend of housing availability and what needs to be built in the next 10 years, you know, it's going to have to be built somewhere, and here's one of the places that certainly that will be happening. So it's
Chatham-Kent will literally be one big. Like, how much is left before a lot of farmland is?
Yeah, so that's
got to be developed.
That's a balance, right? So there are a few areas where, you know, they were always considered part of urban areas, but still were fields. So you think over behind like Erickson Arena and area over here in the southwest near the new school. Yep. We're already zoned to fill in with housing a bit, so that's kind of expected. But then, communities really do have to make a choice. And we're going to see an increased focus on density too. So looking at areas that are existing within the community and increasing the density in those areas is typically the way you know, growth is kind of promoted in Ontario now, because, you know, we don't want to run out into farmland, and that's a really important asset for the community. You got to feed the world. So those opportunities are interesting, and we're seeing more proposals that look like that now than we ever did before. You know?
I wondered that.
Yeah, years and years ago, if an old school that was closing went up for sale, there was no interest in it. You know, maybe someone bought it from Toronto and just held on to it, hoped they could sell it later at a profit. And now those things go up for sale. You'll see multiple bids for someone to get them, and they want to redevelop them because they're within neighborhoods that are, you know, well-developed, nice neighborhoods where they want to put more housing, right?
Oh,
so
interesting.
That's I think those opportunities for increased densification are probably where we're going to continue to see some proposals of growth. And that's not just in Chatham-Kent, that's everywhere.
Nothing is new.
We're
just following.
Yeah, we run into those trends just like everywhere else. And you talk to
It's funny what people can think and how they can get into a negative mindset about how we are just the only community that is allowing
or facing these challenges.
And it's always so surprising to me. I'm like, come on, guys! Like, how do we work together? How do we come together and make this a little bit easier of a situation?
And how do you focus some of that energy into things that are productive too, right? So people care about their community and they get passionate about it, and at the end of the day, you want to capture that passion and that energy and put it into something that's going to make a difference, right? So I think that's always one of the big assets of Chatham-Kent is people definitely feel the motivation to get involved.
What's your driving force in politics? It probably changes some days, but I think about having been from here, growing up here, seeing the community change, raising a family here, and thinking about their future as well. Whether that's back home in Chatham-Kent, which would be great, or if it's somewhere else. You want a community. You want to try and build the community that you want to live in, right? So you want to make sure that people feel welcome here. People have assets here that they can use and appreciate and contribute to a quality of life, right? So I think that at the end of the day, I think that motivation is pretty similar between most people that get involved. Yep. Maybe we have different thoughts about what that looks like, but I think at the end of the day, people are there because they want the community to improve. They want those opportunities, for the people they know and have grown up with and are meeting, and you want to make it a better place. So I think that's the ongoing motivation. I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll ask you one last question. What would you think of? Would you ever run for mayor? Just something that interests you after 10 years on council.
I don't know if I would. I think I was kind of joked that one of the reasons I have lasted for 10 years as a councillor is because on Tuesday I can just go back to work. So it is. I think there's some benefit for me for it being a part-time, full-time job to a degree, in that I get to do what I've been trained to do and spent time educating myself to do most days of the week, and then I can still have this impact on my community in another way. So that's one of the things that's attractive to me, is that if you have a bad Monday night at council, you get to go back to work on Tuesday and forget about it for a bit.
I love that.
And likewise, when you're running your own business and your own practice, it is sometimes nice to have some opportunity to go have an impact in a different way in the community. So
I was going to say, it's got probably a double-edged sword there.
It's
best of kind of both worlds, and because both are helping, both are changing lives, both are pretty amazing.
So it's a good.
You've got a great setup there.
It's a good combination to have, and
then you're molding minds.
And then and that's been
got it going on here, Brock.
That's been it's been a good addition, and it's I've been fortunate to be at St. Clair for a little while, and that is motivating too, to see young people, or some older students as well, looking for opportunities to get involved in a different way in their community too, and being at the start of this process and heading towards a career. That's a cool phase in some people's lives, and it's neat to get to see them for a couple hours a week, and so that's a cool opportunity too, and it's good. I think colleges within communities, post-secondary institutions are important parts of communities. So when you can have community members that are involved there and having some impact, I think that's cool too.
I like that a lot. This has been absolutely amazing. This has been a great interview. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
I
appreciate it. I'll probably see you at the gym.
I'm sure we will.